Well, then I will start with the introduction of the presentation. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and good night for those who are in another latitudes. On behalf of CEDEMA and Revista Tarpán, with the support of Reporte Asia, Alada Chile, Revista Horizonte Independiente, and Politicline, I want to give you a very cordial welcome to the series of talk called Global Overview, Eurasia and Central Asia, that we hold today and Wednesday with four very high-level presentations, which we hope will contribute to the dissemination of knowledge and an improvement of the debate about a region as transcendental, but at the same time so far away and unknown for Latin America, such as Central Asia. In this first presentation, we'll have the honor of listening to Muhayyoi Rahimzoda, doctoral candidate and professor at the Department of Economics in the Corvinus University of Budapest, Hungary, as well as a graduate and master's degree from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, with the presentation titled The Impact of the Russian-Ukrainian War on Central Asian Countries. The Russian-Ukrainian War that began in February 2022 is undoubtedly one of the most relevant events of the current international situation, and its consequences have been visible on different levels in all parts of the world, from the rise in the cost of energy and hydrocarbons to a worsening of food vulnerability in many nations. In addition to, of course, the terrible impact on human lives, towns, and cities in the regions most brutally hit by the conflict and the effect it is having on the reordering of world geopolitics. Central Asia, as Professor Rahimzoda will explain to us, has not been able to escape the effects of the conflict. The geographical proximity to Russia, the enormous economic, labor, and cultural relationship between these countries and Russia, and the vulnerabilities of the Central Asian states have aggravated the effects of the conflict in these former Soviet republics. In this way, I want to appreciate the keenness of Professor Rahimzoda to provide us with her knowledge and research of this relevant and interesting topic. And for the audience that join us today, at the end of the presentation, there will be a space for questions and thoughts. Professor Rahimzoda, please, when you want, the space is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Great thanks to Revista Tarpán for organizing such interesting events where we can share thoughts, discuss, and talk about important issues, right? And it's very interesting to see that far from Central Asia and this part of the world in Latin America, there are researchers who are interested in Central Asia. So today we will be talking about, as our colleague said, Russian-Ukrainian war and its impact on Central Asia. I will share my presentation with you, and I would love if you have questions, any thoughts, any insights, share with me after the presentation. Even during the presentation, you can stop me anytime you want, if you feel so. So I would be very happy to discuss any topics that appeared during listening to this lecture presentation, I would say. So yes, I would not introduce myself one more time. So yeah, and my name is Muhayyoi. So and you can call me just Muhayyoi when you're asking questions. So the presentation, I will try to be short, but at the same time not, because it's a huge topic. And you can see here approximately the structure of the presentation. We will talk about Central Asia in general, about this region, and why is it important even to research this region. And I will try to make you familiar with post-colonialism theory. I think you are familiar because it's also an issue in Latin America, right? So you have some research on that for sure. We will talk about Russian and Central Asian relationship, applying this post-colonialism lens. We will talk about consequences for Central Asia and how to mitigate these risks. I will just try to do like this. So yeah. So let's. So let's talk a little bit in general about Central Asia. Central Asia has become very interesting region and strategic region recently, especially after the collapse of the USSR, because it has a big, huge natural resources, human potential, and it's in general strategic, I would say, location connecting east with west. So here we can see that population of the region was 77 million in 2021, and it's most of the population are young, so they are about to grow, to participate in economic life. And GDP was 347 billion, and it's the share of Central Asia in world GDP was only 0.07%, and we will talk about why it's happening. But at the same time, region is one of the most fastest developing regions in the world. You can see that annual GDP is 6.2% in 2021, and this tendency is over 20 years. The region is strategically important. It has big potential, but at the same time, it faces a lot of challenges due to the several facts. Here I have mentioned Central Asia is a landlocked region in general and lack the access to any sea, so it creates a lot of problems such as logistic problems, right? Export-import problems that makes the cost of the goods much higher for the potential consumers. Resource dependence and low level of financial development, as it is normal with when the country has a lot of natural resources, just to try to develop that specific sector and not pay attention to any other ones. So as a result, the region is dependent on natural resources export. Specifically, it is about Kazakhstan, with export, as I remember, 60-70% of the export is oil. Lack of coordination in the water and energy complex. We will talk about how post-colonialism and in general Soviet system and Soviet Union contributed, I would say, to this problem. But in general, the region is not integrated, and it's very hard for them to negotiate to solve their own internal problems, I would say, because the recent conflict of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan over water in the Fargana Valley can be the good example of that. And this conflict is very, very long one. I have read recently that they settled it, but I'm not sure how long it will continue because it's clashes and it's not only the population and also the army. Climate change and environmental damage. Central Asia is the location of Central Asia is very fragile, I would say, because it is mountainous mostly, and it's one of the regions where global warming is happening much faster, and the glaciers in their mountains are melting much faster. So as a result, you have a lot of flood, you have sometimes drought, and this unbalanced, I would say, environmental issues. So let's go further. Let's try to talk about post-colonialism, post-colonial theory, I would say. So in general, like as you understand from the name of this theory, it's a field of study that examine the lasting influence of colonialism on modern societies, cultures, and politics. You can see here some of the names of the researchers who were coining this term and who were developing further post-colonial studies. Even this field is quite, I would say, relatively researched in other parts of the world. It's new area in Central Asia, and very few people would assume that Soviet Union was imperial, I would say, imperial unity or a colonizer. And there are several factors that they past, like Soviet Union past is less clear and they less identified as a colonizer if the Tsarist Russian is. So first of all, because current leaders who are in all Central Asian countries, they have this Soviet mentality and education, and they rose to power during Soviet Union. So of course, it will be controversial for them to criticize and accept this point that yes, the Soviet Union had at least some characteristics of colonizer. The second thing is dependence on Russia. We will talk about it. What kind of dependency has Central Asia developed so far? And in general, in almost all the countries in Central Asia, the state ideology and politics censor such terms as colony or colonized or colonizer when they are writing and producing knowledge on Central Asia and Central Asian past. So the next thing, before we can research the Central Asia and Soviet or Russian relations through post-colonial lens, we have to understand and answer the two questions. Was the USSR or the Soviet Union a colonial empire? And was Central Asia colonized? When I was researching the topic, there are two perspectives on this point. One group of the researchers say that yes, it was typical colonial empire with typical characteristics of domination and control. On another side, other researchers said that it's unique entity which is focused on modernization. But if you further try to go into literature, you can see that perception of Tsarist and therefore the Soviet Union as a colonizer has changed during the time. So if it was in 1920s, right after the revolution and when Soviet Union start establishing, the Tsarist Russian was absolute evil. It was a brutal colonizer. You could see it in the literature and in academia. But later on, in 1930s, it became lesser evil, as I say in the literature, because the Soviet, I would say, power see the advantages of Soviet Union and how they could change these narratives. And by 1960s, this portray that Soviet Union is a colonizer totally was removed, and the terms of colonization, colony was not allowed to use, and it was like absolute good. It's great, and this unity was like voluntary. The countries wanted to be part of the Soviet Union, and it was mutually beneficial for both parties. This is how they portrayed it in the literature. However, if we go further, in the perestroika era, right before the collapse of the Soviet Union, everything changed, and the fragility of Soviet ideological constructs was revealed. So local intellectuals or intelligentsia, how they call them, they start criticizing Soviet system, and in general, this idea of equality of living as a brothers and sisters were gone, and everyone, of course, were demanding cultural and linguistic recognition. One of the interesting to see that at that time, somehow, not only intelligentsia, but also the authors, the academics became braver, I would say, and talk about the problems that were created during the Soviet system. And one of the examples of that, maybe you have read this book. It's called The Last Days More Than 100 Years. It's written by a Kyrgyz author, Chingiz Aytmatov. And it's very, very interesting because he is trying to show how Central Asian cultures and nations lost their culture by telling a story, and he has a name for it, for a person who lost his memory, Mankurt, who doesn't remember anything from who he is and how he was, what language he speaks, and even he kills his own mother because he doesn't remember anything. So it is very interesting book if you're interested in I would say the mood of that period. You can read the book. But even if the Soviet Union collapsed, so it was in 1991, and all the countries got independence, the idea of Russian superiority, that this is a big brother, didn't disappear. And this big brother idea that he will come always and help me can be seen very, very nicely in the example of Russian-Ukrainian war and how it affected Central Asia and how it, I would say, further worsen the post-colonial dynamics in Central Asia. And we can see it through economic consequences, political pressure, and increased poverty and inequality. And within this presentation, I will further talk about mostly poverty and inequality, but of course it's totally connected with two economic consequences and political consequences. So let's go further. Before I will go to Central Asia itself, let's talk a little bit about the Russian-Ukrainian war. Russian-Ukrainian war was shocking and is shocking not only for Central Asia, but for all countries in the world. And it have driven, I would say it's still doing it, a lot of people into poverty. And for example, there is statistics from a World Bank that 71% or 71 million people, was forcibly driven into poverty after the start of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And the most, I would say, the hardest hit was taken by Central Asia. Again, why? Because of its close economic, political, and cultural ties, and this post-colonial dependence, I would say, post-colonial relationship, and especially the non-commodity exporters such as Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan felt the consequences most, because Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan could somehow still function as they have this support from natural resources. So Russian-Ukrainian war and the Central Asia, we will try to understand how it affects through two channels: remittances, trade, and food security. So let's talk about remittances first. You can see here is a number. This is the official statistics, of course. We don't know, maybe there are more. 5 million people from Central Asia are working in Russia in different cities of the Russian Federation. And Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are the most dependent countries. Uzbekistan is there also, but less. And in most of the cases, this money transfers that is sent by the workers to Central Asian countries. It's the only source of income for many, many households because mostly the workers are coming from rural area and so sending the money to their families. Here you can see the remittances received. It's percent of GDP for Central Asian countries. I don't have much information on Turkmenistan. I think you know why, because it's very hard to get it, and I am very biased about their official statistics provided by the government. So you can see only 3 of them and 4 of the countries, and you can see that Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan are the most dependent, and Tajikistan in 2022, 51% of GDP was from remittances, and for Kyrgyzstan it's almost 30%. So of course this only source of income contributes to poverty reduction in Central Asian countries. There is a statistic that the income got from the remittances contribute to 11% of or 11 percentage point of decrease of poverty in Kyrgyzstan, for example. And this only income mainly is spent on food and healthcare, basic needs. It's not about saving, it's not about luxury, it's just the basic needs that they need. So again, yes, there are problems with the economies in these countries, and people, of course, are going to other countries to earn for better economic opportunities. But 90% of all these people are going to Russia. And we will talk about this also and about mitigating risk and how it could work in the future. So what happened after the war with these remittances? We know that Russia has been under sanctions, and a lot of international companies left Russian market, which means that Russian labor market is squeezed and there are less jobs, and because of the economic conditions, of course, the salaries much less than it was, and the currency devaluated. If you send 6,000 rubles and it was 1,000 somoni in Tajikistan, and you could live there for 1 month in the rural area. Now, if you send 6,000, it's only 500-600 somoni, which is much less than it can be, and it is very, very visible, I would say, for the household, because even $1-2 makes sense for them. So again, there are less workers, less salary, and a lot of migrants had to leave Russia because of the risk being taken to the army. Many workers in the Russian Federation trying to get, at least they were trying to get the Russian citizenship, not to have all this bureaucracy with the documents, with getting license, with paying every month 5,000 rubles to the government, additionally to their income tax. So if you have Russian citizenship, then you will be taken to the army. So they had to leave. Here you can see the remittances received, the graphs, and you can see that here in 2022, it's Uzbekistan. It's very, very big, huge increase. What is it? What's going on, right? They say it's going down, but why? Because a lot of Russian migrants and companies left Russian market also, again, because it's very hard to function within the sanctions. So they left and they moved their companies, their capital to other countries, especially Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and also a lot of Russian people being threatened by persecution, they went to other Central Asian countries because it was the only place they could go at that time. They can't go to Europe, and Turkey also is not accepting many Russian migrants and in general migrants to Turkey. So they left, and a lot of them were getting, I would say, transfers also. So this is the explanation to that. But if you go to predictions, you can see that different international organizations are predicting very huge, I would say, decline of remittances. For example, IMF saying 5-13% for the region, and this as a result will force 1 million people into poverty in the region, because again, it's basic needs, which is purchased with the help of their remittances. So, and you can see here the graph that remittances from Russia in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan is the highest, so it means a lot. And here you can see the projected losses since the war and how much the remittances declined. So let's go further. The second channel, how Russian-Ukrainian war affected Central Asian countries, is trade, and as a result, food security. So Central Asia is very economically dependent on Russia because Russia still remains one of the largest exporter and importer in Central Asia. And even if there are other players such as China and Turkey, but still the trade partners are quite limited. And so you can see here the information about that Russia is the largest importer for all Central Asian countries except Kyrgyzstan, and largest destination of export for Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Uzbekistan. Taking into account that the region is one of the least integrated regions into global market, with only 1% of share in global market, it makes it much more difficult for Central Asia to maneuver, I would say, to operate in such conditions, because if you have your trade partner under sanctions and you can't trade with it, so you will have problem. And the second thing is that the last thing I would say, the last thing is that Central Asia still heavily depends on routes through Russia, and all the businesses are delivering the viral goods like seeds, fertilizers, production resources, raw materials via routes from Russia and to Russia. But now, as we know, Russia is closed for Europe and other partners that it had. So it makes everything much more expensive, like because logistic is more expensive, food will be more expensive, and insurance cost will be much higher. So we will talk about how it affects the food security in global market. So before we go into Central Asia, let's talk about the role of Ukraine and Russia in general in food market, global food market. You can see here Ukraine and Russia, they are one of the biggest, I would say, greatest exporters of wheat, barley, maize, sunflower oil. You can see the share of Ukraine and Russia. And Ukraine even is known for being the bread basket of Europe, because it delivers exports a lot of wheat to Europe. And what happened in Ukraine after the war, that there were 7 out of 13 Ukrainian ports were blocked. The storage facilities, grain storage facilities were destroyed. A lot of fertilizer plants were, of course, shut down, and many farmers, they left their lands, they were taken to the army, and as a result, we have what we have that we'll talk about these food prices. And on the Russian side, what happened, the sanctions and limitations, like Russia can't export the fertilizers that is very important for the agricultural sector, especially in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, just because banking limitations. Russia is not in SWIFT, the Visa, MasterCard, or they don't operate in Russia anymore. So the country is not able to export fertilizers. So as a result, you can see here it's food commodity prices in select international markets and energy fertilizer prices. You can see this jump in 2023, right after like the war, and so you can see here jump and then further another jump. So and what does it mean for Central Asia? Central Asia is again very dependent on Ukrainian and Russian wheat. You can see that Tajikistan imports almost like 100% of its wheat from Russia. It was in 2020, and Kyrgyzstan 55% of the wheat from Russia, and 70%, as I have mentioned, of the income that household has in these countries is allocated to food expenses. But the surging food prices is very, I would say, life-threatening for many families, because, for example, if we talk about Tajikistan, right after the war, the price of the bread was 25-30% higher. You can see the sugar, meat, eggs, 40-50%, and energy resources 200%. And food prices in Kyrgyzstan 50%, and inflation in Kazakhstan overall it's 20%. And of course, all these official numbers, right? And we know that sometimes they can be biased. And overall inflation in Uzbekistan was 12%. So in general, these two channels that we can identify so far, and we can see through this that even if Russia was like the relationship of Soviet Union and Central Asia as a colonizer and colonized ended in 1991, there are big dependence between this relationship. And Apshin, I think his name was researcher, he said that Russia developed some kind of colonialism dependence relationship with Central Asia. And what can Central Asian countries do to mitigate risks, to decolonize? I would say this is one of the steps. Of course, decolonization will take much more time and take into account the political, economic, and cultural aspects. First of all, diversification of the trade partners and trade routes, of course, and China is becoming one of the biggest player in Central Asia, but at the same time, Central Asian countries should be careful with that also, because there is another tendency, is that dependence developing in the region, especially in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And the recent tendency I have also read, it's about Central Asia and Europe. They have some expos where Central Asian countries representing their products in different markets in Europe, and migration destination. Of course, unfortunately, from what I see in near future, Central Asian countries will not be able to fully, I would say, meet the needs of the population in terms of labor. So there will be migration anyway, but it could be diversified. It could be not 90% going to Russia at least, right? But I can see some tendencies also. For example, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are trying to have some negotiations on sending workers to South Korea, for example, and the Middle East, like Qatar, Kuwait. Regional integration and cooperation, of course. The region should try to focus more on internal problems, to cooperate more to solve these internal problems, such as, for example, water issues or energy complex, right? Because maybe the problems connected with water energy will be seen in future more, because all the equipment, everything, facilities that were used and are being used in Central Asia in energy and water complexes, they are from the Soviet Union time. And when they are gone, I would say they deteriorate, then it will be even much more problem. Even now in Tajikistan, for example, you can have a lot of limitation in accessing electricity because you're sitting in the middle of the night or in the middle of the city center, and you will have cut off the electricity. So yes, and I think that this problem can will be more in the future, unfortunately. And yes, adjusting to new realities and using the opportunities. It is about the point that a lot of Russian companies and international companies move their headquarters from Russia to Central Asia, and Central Asian countries could use this opportunity to hold these companies there, because it's fresh, new technologies, fresh ideas, new capital, and at the same time, a lot of young Russian people who have high education and who had some work experience in their homeland. They are moving outside, and they are going as a first destination to Central Asian countries because it is accessible, and the Central Asian countries have to do have to create some incentives to keep these workers there, so they will not be like a transit region just to come to stay a bit and go, but just to hold these specialists and who will be contributing to the development of the region further. This is it. I think we have another 20 minutes, right, for discussion.
Right.
Yeah, and I would be very happy if you have, even if it is not a question, just your comments, your insights, whatever you read about Central Asia. Maybe I missed something I here or whatever. I would love to discuss it, please.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you very much, Muhayyoi, for this excellent presentation you have given us. I believe this has undoubtedly been a great contribution to our understanding and reflection on the current situation in the countries of Central Asia. Next, right now, I will give the space to the audience who wish to ask questions or thoughts on the topic we have listened. If you wish, you may raise your hands in the Zoom version, or if you have problems with the English language, you can write in the chat the question, and I will translate to Muhayyoi. Please. Gabriel Sandoval.
Thanks, Gabriel. Hi, Muhayyoi. Thanks a lot for your presentation. As Revista Tarpán, we are very grateful for your time and this quality of information. I have two questions. You can take as you want. The first is about the security concept, because Russia is the hegemon in the region, as you said, like the historical hegemon, but as we published yesterday, the enclaves topic, for example, between Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And if we see the last year, for example, another region from the ex-Soviet Union, Armenia and Azerbaijan, Russia is not has not the power to keep all the neighborhood, if we can say. How do you see that situation? And another is about the remittance that you say, because Central Asia, of course, we always associate with Russia in general, but in the neighborhood is China too, and Iran could be a really relevant actor. So you saw in the last years more migrants from Central Asia to China, to Iran, or to another country, for example, Turkey. And if this kind of migration contributes to the economical aspects of these countries. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions. They are very interesting. So yeah, I will start with the security issues. I would say, of course, Russia, especially now, Russia is not able to hold all this power, I would say, that it had because of the war and all the attention and all the, I would say, finances of Russia is going to war. But at the same time, I think the country is trying to prioritize somehow the strategic partners of itself, because when there was the situation in January in Kazakhstan, when they were trying to regain the power from the new president Tokayev, Russia sent its troop there, even if it was before the war. And of course, the country can't go to the war one day. They were planning the war, and they knew that there will be the war, and then they need all these resources for the war. But still, Russia went as a big brother to support Kazakhstan. But in terms of Armenia and Azerbaijan, I think there was also intervention. But again, from my point of view, Russia is trying to prioritize, right? When there was a need to take part of Georgia, so all in 2008, right? All the attention was, all the resources was there. So maybe it is trying to okay, now I will be busy with that. If I finish Ukraine, I will go and further influence Armenia and Azerbaijan, right? But at the same time, if we think Russia and China becoming very close in all terms, not only economic and even like security issues, so maybe I don't know how much it is possible, because it's very controversial. China is going very deep into Central Asian issues, and they taking these lands. You can in Russian literature, like journals nowadays, you will not have this information. But if you search in the English language, you will find that Tajikistan had to give part of its land as an agreement to be to write off its debt, I would say. But of course, it will not be in the Russian like media and stuff, or Tajik media, because when I saw the change in the area, I was like, what's going on? When I was at school, it was not this much. It was more. Where is it? And when you start researching, you will see it. So my point is that Russia will try to somehow be in the region, but now because it's friend with China, they are trying to somehow divide maybe their influence in the region, right? So according to in terms of the second question, remittances, I'm not sure about China. If people from Central Asia can go to China. China is one of the most famous destination for studies for a lot of students from Central Asia, especially like I know a lot of like scholarships for students from Tajikistan. But China has one of the highest unemployment rate among youth. So I don't know how much they need this unqualified, unskilled workers from Central Asia who don't speak Chinese. I don't see China as a destination, but I see vice versa, that a lot of Chinese companies, a lot of Chinese workers are coming to Central Asia to work. I remember I saw this situation in my country when I was seeing that Chinese people were working in the coal extracting in the mountains. You don't need like specific skills to just extract coal. Why can't they take Tajik workers, right, that who are going to Russia and just work? But no, this is how economy works. Your people go to Russia and Chinese come to your country. So in terms of Iran, I'm not sure also, because Iran is facing a lot of challenges now, and I am not so much aware of the Iranian economy, but in terms of politics, it's becoming very hard to function there. And maybe for Tajik people, as they speak Persian, it will be easier for them to go to Iran to work. But again, I know now Tajikistan is not very good friend with Iran because of the Islamic radicalization, as they say. So, but from other countries, I don't see it because, again, Iran is facing very big political crisis in that term. Turkey, yes, it can be a big destination for many Turkic republics, all except Tajikistan. And I think Turkey feels it because starting from April 2024, now, for example, Tajik people can't go to Turkey. They need visa. For example, my husband is Turkish, but I can't go. I was applying twice. They didn't give me. So it's very interesting case. But yes, I know that a lot of Uzbek people are going to Turkey because the similarities of language. It can be one of the destination, but again, Turkish economy, we know what's going on there, right? With the inflation, with devaluation of the currencies. So it's very complicated. It's very complicated, but still it's possible mostly for the Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. And they already have a lot of workers, and you can see them when I go and I talk to them. You can see that they are from Uzbekistan. So yes. Any other questions?
Well, I have a question
Yes, please.
regarding the presentation.
Yeah.
I understand that the Central Asian countries have a very complex dynamic of ethnic relations, both within the states and also in the region interstates of the region. How has this war, the Russo-Ukrainian war, have affected the interethnic relations in the Central Asian countries?
Between ethnicities, you mean?
Example, bueno, Uzbek people, Tajik people,
Okay.
or the
Yeah.
or the Karapakistan people in
Yes,
the.
yes. What I would say that in most cases, the influence of the Russian language is very big in the Central Asian countries, and as a result, the news that is reported in these countries from Russia are still very popular. So you can imagine that whoever you meet, they will be pro-Russian because they watch Russian news. So even my father, he is super educated. And when we talk about this topic, I'm in Europe, he's in Tajikistan, and he watches Russian news. We can't agree on the things. So I can imagine less educated people who has less critical thinking, I would say, and how much they would believe, right, to this point, or to Russian media, and it's much harder for them to examine, to analyze other sources in English because they literally don't speak, right? So in all the countries, most of them, like most of the people are pro-Russian, but in Kazakhstan, they, depending on the region, of course, they, like cities closer to Russia, of course, they are pro-Russian, but in general, the mood in Almaty and the biggest countries, like cities, right, Almaty and Astana, is they're trying to be neutral. They're trying to say that we are not supporting it, so please stop and don't, because I think their fears also are connected to the point that what they say in Russia. Okay, there was no Kazakhstan, there was no Kyrgyzstan. We just created it because we wanted during Soviet Union, right? And then they will come the next day after the finish of the war to Kazakhstan. Sorry, guys, this part of your land is ours because it was historically ours. So this is maybe somehow support why they think differently. Because, for example, in Tajikistan, they are not scared that they will come because Tajikistan is a middle, right? So it's harder to. So yes, the perception mostly pro-Russian, except big cities in Kazakhstan, I would say, yes.
Thank you very much.
There is a question.
In the chat, there is a question,
Yeah.
I believe, from Eleonora Ronchetti. Thank you very much, so much, Muhayyoi, for the presentation. Very interesting. I wasn't able to understand if you consider this situation of dependence between a group of commodities exporters countries and a big worldwide leader as neocolonialism or not. It's a very spread theory, also applicable to Latin American countries and the United States in commercial aspects.
I would say yes, in most cases. Why? Because I want to get rid of the chart. The Soviet Union economy was built in a very interesting way. Why? The point of the Soviet Union system was that we have to make all the countries dependent from each other, so they will not seek independence. They will not say, okay, I don't want to be in this union, right? So the commodity countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they are specialized in cotton steel, for example, in Uzbekistan, just because in that time, Soviet Union commanded it to be a cotton country. Or Kazakhstan, why they are exporting so much oil? Because again, the equipment, the facilities were built during the Soviet Union, and now they can do it further, right? So I think that they were somehow destined to be in that situation, and they don't have any choice to act differently. And this is a consequences, I would say, of post-colonialism that they still face. And if you are under a rule or under, like, if you are operating under specific rules for 70 years, it's quite hard not to do so during 30 years, right? Like it doesn't work like this. Like I don't want it, let's change, right? Even the people who are ruling still all have this Soviet Union mentality. Just try to talk to them about Soviet Union in a bad way. So I was like, what are you talking about? You didn't even live there. Stop it. So yes, I think it is somehow, but again, it's very controversial because not everyone even considers Soviet Union, like among researchers, right, as a colonial empire. So yes, I hope I understood your question right and answered it.
Is there anyone else who want to maybe another question or a thought? Francisca Carrasco.
Hi, I have a question. First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. My question is, what do you think could be an incentive to keep the new human capital from leaving Central Asia when the war is over?
The Russian who came to Central Asia, right? You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, for example, they are trying to do different things in different countries. In Tajikistan, they are giving these specific cards that you can use for 1-2 years. That like they're trying to remove this bureaucracy of getting the permission, working, paying taxes, and all these things. In Uzbekistan, I know that there are specific programs if you open your business there, like reduce tax and etc. But again, I am not 100% sure that Russian workers, because they are moving from big cities like St. Petersburg and Moscow and Novosibirsk, for example, they are used to better life conditions in that term and better salaries. And in general, living of like standards of living are higher, right? They are in the big cities of Russia. So they are still will be using Central Asia as a transit. And very few, I think, will stay. And I can see it in terms of Tajikistan, because right after the war, it was like so big chaos, so many people were coming, and I could just personally experience it from my mom because she's working at the airport. But now, nobody, right? Because they start learning how to go to other countries. Again, it's very interesting topic, maybe things for you from Latin America to know that I know a lot of people from Russia who are pregnant or who get pregnant to go to give birth in Argentina. And when I heard it, I was like, what's going on? Why? And then that you get this citizenship by birth, right? And because it doesn't work in Europe like that. Your one of your parents should be the holder of this passport to get it. So they are trying to find different ways to go to other countries that they think is better for them, or Israel, for example. A lot of people were going to Israel, but not anymore, apparently. So yes, I don't think that any kind of incentives will keep them, maybe very few of them, because Central Asia in general is not a place to be considered as a good place for Russian workers to stay and work. Yes. Unfortunately.
Gabriel, another question.
Thanks. Yes, I have another question. I want to come back about the media that you said in Central Asia or in Tajikistan, because in another post-Soviet countries like Latvia, for example, they have if we can say, a strong regulation about the Russian media speakers. So since the beginning, from this Russian-Ukrainian war, you can you saw some movement similar in some Central Asian countries, not too friendly with Russia. For example, in I think Uzbekistan have in the last decades some distance from Russia in defense aspect, we can say. So how do you see this situation?
I have already seen it's in Kazakhstan. I know that in Kazakhstan it was, I think, last year, yes, approximately 9 months ago, they had a regulation that in order to watch Russian channels, you have to pay now. So it's one of the ways, I think, to try to somehow control media in there, not to watch, because Kazakhstan is one of the one of the Central Asian countries where most of the people speak Russian, like a lot of them. And even I know some people who are Kazakh and they don't speak Kazakh. And when I met them, when I was meeting them before, and I was like, what's going on? Why don't you speak like? But I was underestimating this influence of the Russian language, right? Because a lot of them go to Russian school, they speak Russian at home, and so this is some of the ways I think to somehow control. I'm not sure about Tajikistan because we don't care. Like, in general, like we have other problems to solve. I don't think that they are thinking about changing the minds and the look we have there at this situation. In Kyrgyzstan, Kyrgyzstan was they call Kyrgyzstan before as a island of democracy in Central Asia until this new president came. And but you can see there that now it's going towards this totalitarian, this dictatorship regime, because they had one of the most open media, I would say. That journalists could express freely their opinion, and they had so many revolutions that is so unusual for Central Asia, so many presidents. But now recently with the new president, they don't have it anymore. I have seen a lot of cases of journalists who had been arrested just because they expressed their points. So Kyrgyzstan going a bit back, I would say, and I don't think they even think about somehow controlling the media, because the new president is a good friend of Russia. So yes, about Turkmenistan, I can't say anything because I think they already have this issue not to watch any other channels except their own. So yeah, I think Kazakhstan is going towards that, but other countries, it's the least problem that they could think about at this stage of their development, I would say.
Thanks a lot for the answer.
Of course.
Anyone else have any questions or thoughts about the presentation to Muhayyoi? Well, fine. I would like to thank once again to Muhayyoi Rahimzoda for her excellent presentation and answer to the questions. It has been an honor to have you with us. And also, I'd like to say thank you to the audience present today for their interest and enthusiasm to participating in the event. I want to cordially invite you to the talks that we have today in like 1 more hour and the Wednesday, starting in 1 hour with Suraj Samin from Afghanistan with his presentation entitled Geopolitics of Asia, Afghanistan. And Wednesday with Eldanis Gusainov from Kazakhstan and his presentation called Kazakhstan Foreign Policy Between Eurasianism and Regionalism. And Ignacio Wozniak from Argentina, who will talk to us about Russia and the heart of Eurasia, the modern geopolitical discourse in the reconstruction of the Russian nation in the 21st century. Please have a great day. Thank you very much once again from this event. It was, I believe, it was a great chat, a great presentation. Thank you very much, Muhayyoi.
Thank you for the inviting, yes, and thank you for such interesting gatherings. It's really nice to share thoughts, and I hope we will meet again. Yes, and any of you, if you come to Europe, please let me know. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Francis.
Of course, you're also invited to Argentina and Chile whenever you want.
Thank you. These countries are in my list. I would definitely. Yeah. Thank you. Have a nice day. And yeah,
have a nice
evening for me. Bye-bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.